Hey guys, let's get straight to the point. Today we're going to talk about the K&F Concept 1/4 strength black mist filter with variable ND built in. The reason why we got this combination is because we want a more of a on-the-go setup with this mist filter and variable ND because we film a lot of stuff during the daytime and it is really annoying to have a black mist filter and then having to screw on the variable ND. That's why we got this. And we think that this is a good solution, but we actually returned the filter because of the reasons that we're going to mention. This filter has 4 stops of variable ND. So what that means is on top of the mist filter that is quarter strength, we have a variable ND filter that you can just spin and have up to 4 stops of ND filter to block off sunlight. So ND filters are just like sunglasses for camera lenses. So that's why we need it, because on the A7 IV, especially when the native ISO is 800, that's the minimum. And with a lens that is about 1.8 f-stop that we're using, the 35mm f1.8, it is way too bright to film outside during the daytime. What happens is if you don't have a variable ND filter or a strong enough ND filter, you will have to stop down your lens to f like 11 or like 16 to film whatever you're filming during the daytime. And that is not ideal. And another solution is to up the shutter speed, which is not ideal at all, especially when you're making video because all the motion blur will be messed up. So that's why we got this variable ND filter. Besides the 4-stop ND, this filter also has a black mist filter that we reviewed earlier, and that is a quarter strength. As we mentioned in the previous video, this mist strength is a lot stronger than the quarter mist of the Black Pro mist filter from Tiffin. It is almost like a half strength of the black mist filter from Tiffin. So it is definitely not the same as the quarter strength as the Tiffin one. So the numbers don't really matter. So the first thing that we like about this filter is it has hard stops. So what that means is when we're using variable ND filters, when you spin the outer ring to use or to increase the strength of the ND, if you have used like cheaper variable ND filters before, you know that you can freely spin that outer ring and it just keeps going and going. And it will go from the weakest strength to the highest strength, and then it will go back to the weakest. So what that does is, of course, without the hard stop, it's really hard to know when to stop, and it would just go from like super dark and then lighter again. So that's a problem. And the second really important problem is with these kind of setups, they will create an X pattern when it gets to a certain point, mainly between the darkest and the lightest. So you go from the lightest, the weakest strength of the ND to the strongest, and then after the strongest, it will show you the X pattern on your lens, which is definitely unusable if you recorded that footage. So there's no X pattern on this one because there's a hard stop between the lightest and the darkest. So you can never go between the other way around. So that's a good point. That's a really good feature that we want to talk about. And the second thing is this ND filter or the variable ND filter is kind of different compared to the cheaper ones or even the most expensive one that we have, the Polar Pro one. It has a little stick out corner that you can just use your finger to kind of spin the ring. And it's really easy to control compared to the Polar Pro or the cheaper ones where there's nothing. You need to kind of like use your fingertip to grab onto the outer ring to spin the ND filter. When we have our camera on a gimbal, especially if you're trying to like spin that Polar Pro variable ND filter, you basically have to grab onto the lens so tight and hold onto the camera and try to spin it in order to change the ND strength. So that's not what we like with the other ND filters. And the K&F Concept one actually has that little triangular stick out thing that you can use your finger to spin it, and it's really easy to spin. It can be a good thing or a bad thing, depends on how you like it. You might accidentally spin it if you're using like your camera, like hand holding it. So we like it. We really like it. The hard stops and also that stick out thing that you can control the variable ND filter with. Again, we mentioned that the quarter strength black mist from K&F Concept is much stronger than the Tiffin Black Pro mist quarter strength. It is too strong. The main purpose of us using this variable ND filter plus mist filter is for outdoor daytime filming. And the mist filter is just way too strong that it washed out the image and it gives you a really low contrast image. Yes, you can pull the contrast back in, but the problem is during daytime, if your image is way too washed out by the mist or the blooming from the highlights, your image will start losing like critical details. So that's why we can't really keep it, because it's just ruining the image, because the sunlight is making the image really, really washed out. So keep that in mind. But if you're filming on a cloudy day, or if you're filming, let's say, indoor without direct lights, that will give a really, really nice bloomy effect on the person's highlight roll off and their skin. So definitely consider that if you're filming mainly during cloudy day or indoor. The second reason why we cannot keep this filter is because 4 stops of ND is not strong enough for daytime use, even on a cloudy day. Because the A7IV has a native ISO of 800 for S-Log3, in order to have the highest dynamic range, we have to have a stronger ND. 4 stops, it will not protect the sky. You won't be able to protect like whatever that's in the sky, the cloud. Everything will be blown out. You need at least around 8 to 9 stop in order to use the A7IV native ISO 800 with a sort of a faster lens at f1.8. If you're using like an f3.5 or f5 kind of aperture, then you don't really need that strong of an ND. But for us, we try to have an ND filter that would allow us to use faster aperture like f1.8. We are not even filming at f1.4 already. At f1.8, you need about a 9-stop ND in order to film during daytime to protect all the highlights, protect the sunlight, overexposing everything. So 4 stops, not enough. That's why we have to return this. Another thing that you have to keep in mind when you are considering purchasing this variable ND filter with black mist from K&F Concept is this variable ND filter has a pretty strong yellow greenish kind of tint. We'll show you very soon on our computer how it looks like compared to without any filter, so you have kind of a general idea of what you're going to deal with when you're using this variable ND filter. This kind of tint, it's quite normal, quite common with other variable ND as well. Even the expensive one that we have, the Polar Pro one, it has a tint. So you just need to know what you're doing or dealing with, I should say, in order to have the colors that you want. You have to kind of white balance it before you record, or if you have a preset like ourselves, we have corrected it using our color chart already. So if we're filming daytime, we don't really have to white balance it like every time. We just need to correct it because the color codec on the A7IV is strong enough for us to kind of shift that color tint back to normal to white balance it. But this is something that you should definitely keep in mind. It has a yellowish green tint on this variable ND filter. We always want to keep a variable ND filter on our camera. Actually, I know it sounds kind of weird that you want like a sunglass in front of your camera all the time, but modern day cameras, especially the A7IV with the native ISO at 800 and 3200, it's okay. Like you have to use an ND filter anyway, most of the time, like 80% of the time, unless you are really filming in a super dark environment, then take off the variable ND. But keeping it on our camera with just like 1 or 2 stops, it's totally fine. It's not gonna ruin your image or create like super noisy image, because you can jump up to 3200 on the A7IV with the ISO level. If you're filming with the A7S3 or FX3, that's even better. You have like the second native ISO at 12,800. That's like super bright. So we're not worried to have to keep this variable ND on our camera. It's actually really convenient because with 1 or 2 stops, it basically it's not doing anything to the light almost. Just like super tiny kind of darkening of your image. So that's why we want to have this filter on our camera. We wanted to keep it, but we just had to return it. If you're an A7IV user, our suggestion, or actually what we're doing right now after we return the variable ND filter with the quarter strength mist filter from K&F Concept, is we actually purchased the quarter strength black mist, or the quarter strength black pro mist filter from Tiffin, and we purchased another K&F Concept variable ND filter from 1 to 10 stops. So this combination we can still kind of work with a less strong or weaker, I should say, mist effect with the quarter strength Black Pro mist filter from Tint, and we have a stronger ND from 1 stop to 10 stop from K&F Concept. So this is the combination we'll suggest you guys to use because we really like this combination, and we will talk about this combo that we have set up for our A7IV in our next video. So definitely stay tuned. All right, now let's take a look at some of the footage that we recorded on our computer to show you guys the green yellowish tint that we talked about the K&F Concept variable ND filter with the quarter strength mist. On our computer, we have this image right here that we always use to kind of test the mist filter effect and also color tinting. We have our color checker passport on our left hand side, and then we have some objects, and we have an LED light that we want to show you how bloomy it is when it comes to using a mist filter from K&F Concept. So the first image is the base image that we recorded without any filter in front of our lens, and we color corrected it using the color checker passport on the left hand side. So you can tell that all the colors are accurate, and we applied the same color correction to the one with the filter. So you can see how yellowy tinted or green tinted using the mist filter. It's not like super strong, but it's there. It's really obvious. We'll show you right now. This is with the mist filter. You can see the yellow greenish tint, especially on the wall. And you can see that the mist effect is really strong and really bloomy. It's a really stylistic choice if you are going to use this filter, because without a direct light, it's already super bloomy. So imagine if you're filming with the sun or any strong light source directly beaming onto the lens, it will be super washed out. So this is how it looks like with the mist filter. The next image is with the LED light turned on. And this is the base image. This is without using the variable ND filter and the mist filter combination. So this is just a base image. Again, we color corrected using the color checker passport, and we'll show you the image with the mist filter. So focus on the LED light on the right hand side right here. This is without, this is with. You can tell that the image is now super bloomy. The pink hue is kind of washing out almost half of the image right here. And it's getting onto the camera and also the color checker passport. You're losing a lot of contrast if you have a strong light source. The next footage that we're going to show you is how this mist filter or variable ND filter with the mist filter built in is going to change when you increase the variable ND steps, or the stops, I should say, to see if there's any different color cast when you change the stop of the ND. So I'm just gonna put the cursor here. This is with the mist filter and the variable ND. I'm just gonna keep stopping it down or increasing the strength of the variable ND to show you how it looks like. I have the ISO set to auto in order to counterbalance that darkening image effect. So you can tell that so far, increasing the strength of the variable ND is not really doing too much in terms of color casting. So that's a good news. So no matter how you change the stop or the strength of the variable ND, it's not giving you a different color cast, which is going to be super annoying if you're filming like a scene or a set of scenes where you have to keep changing the variable ND strength. So this is a really good news. When you guys are looking at color casting, you can also pay attention at the vector scope right here. I can show you the first image again. So you can see that the vector scope is kind of in the middle because we color corrected it. If we jump to the one with the mist filter, you can see that it shifts. So it's kind of shifting towards the yellow side by having this entire spider web kind of thing shifting to the yellow side to the left. That's the color hue shifting. Same thing with this when we change the strength of the variable ND filter is not shifting the vector scope. So that's why we can confirm that it's not giving you a different color cast when you are changing the strength of the variable ND filter, which is great. That's it. That's all I want to talk about the K&F Concept variable ND with the quarter strength mist filter. If you have any comment or questions, let us know in the comment section below and we will really appreciate them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.